Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric Entertaining series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project. More specifically in this instance, Taki Udon and Retro React's new SuperStation 1, which went up for sale a few weeks ago. I did a video on that telling you it was going to be for sale soon, and I know a ton of you based on the comments went and purchased one, which absolutely excites me because I'm for everything that grows the MiSTer FPGA ecosystem. The more people playing FPGA gaming on a MiSTer board, the happier I am. And honestly, even though the price has slightly risen because it's been a few weeks since the initial pre-order for the friends and family, for under $200 you're still getting the entirety of a MiSTer FPGA along with snack support for original memory cards and controllers for PlayStation 1. It is just a wild price to come in under, and I'm so glad that the MiSTer FPGA ecosystem and user group out there is growing. The more users, the more cores, the more fun, the more good everything that's going to come to MiSTer FPGA in 2025. But I know a lot of you in the comments had specific questions about the SuperStation 1 and some of its functionality, and Taki Udon's updated a lot of people over on Twitter with new details, new photographs, and new information about exactly how it functions, because obviously it is inspired and themed by a PlayStation 1, the PS1, not the original design, but I don't have one in my collection to put on camera, so it's going to be everything an original PlayStation 1 would be, plus everything else MiSTer FPGA can be. So you're talking about hundreds upon hundreds of systems, arcade boards, and computers, all for under that $200 mark, and that is just wild. Just so you know, you can still grab one of these if you haven't decided to jump on one yet. They are still available. But Taki Udon has been putting up new tweets, new information, especially about the Super Dock, the dock with the CD-ROM that goes underneath the SuperStation 1 if you so choose to add it to your order. Now do be aware this is not mandatory or necessary whatsoever for the functionality of something like the SuperStation 1 or MiSTer FPGA. It is just an add-on, and now we have a better look at exactly what it looks like. You're going to see there at the bottom, it basically nests under the PS1 style case. You're going to get 4 USB ports. Obviously those are going to be used for controlling other cores depending on what you want to play, and the main feature is going to be that CD-ROM drive in the middle with the eject button. Now it seems more like this is going to be actually dumping your disk upon first insertion to a hard drive installed within, and then every time you put the disk in successively, it is going to load the game up. But of course you're going to get the snack adapters built in. You're going to be able to have those 2 controller ports and 2 memory card ports as well if you want to use original memory cards, but I'm sure it'll save to a file just like everything else on MiSTer FPGA. And even though it grew a little bit taller, I do love the design, and you'll see here around the side there is that door, which is going to be for an SSD to save the games that you would put into that CD-ROM drive and probably anything else on MiSTer FPGA. And MiSTer's always been compatible with SSD, so it's nice to see it in a completely different form factor. It is pretty exciting, and if we move over to the website, you will see that there's new photographs up of the units and more information as well. And again, it's so fun to see MiSTer FPGA end up in a design that has design language behind it. I love my aluminum triple stack. I think it looks absolutely gorgeous, but seeing some plastic injected molding things that make it look like a console is fun as well. And it's going to be completely different than the MiSTer Pi triple stack that you could purchase last year, because that is based on a clone of the Triassic board. But Taki Udon and Remake have gone through and made a custom PCB for the SuperStation 1, which still has all of the quote-unquote MiSTer FPGA hardware on there, like the actual Cyclone V system on a chip FPGA chip, but it's going to be a much simpler design than actually building your own. And I think if you don't have a MiSTer yet and you're still thinking about getting one, I know Taki Udon is going to be restocking the MiSTer Pi soon. It is a fun way to jump in and start playing MiSTer FPGA now, maybe while you wait for that console, maybe late summer, early fall, or otherwise, because at the end of the day, MiSTer FPGA gives you absolutely so much stuff to do and play, and building it definitely gives you a better understanding of exactly how the hardware works. And for some people, I know you just like the magic box that does things, you never have to think about how it functions, but for others out there, it really does give you an idea of the technology behind how FPGA gaming works. And honestly, if you can build a Lego set, you can build a MiSTer FPGA. It is incredibly easy, and it's a really satisfying thing to do. Now, taking a look at the website, we have clear photos as well as the I/O, and I know a lot of people have been asking exactly what this thing has for I/O, and I will say basically absolutely everything. You're going to have USB-C power in, you're going to have 2 USB ports on the back, obviously HDMI out, you're going to have mini DIN as well as VGA, and those are going to carry a ton of analog signals. You have analog audio out as well as Ethernet, so you're going to get RGB, 24-bit, everything like that out of the back. You'll see here we also have component, composite, and digital audio, so you're going to be able to do component to your television if you don't have anything that'll take RGB, and you also have composite if you want to go really old school. But it's going to be fun to see see all of these different inputs when they come out, because it is just again mirroring what MiSTer Pi and MiSTer FPGA can do. You're getting RGB video out, you're getting component, you're getting composite, you can probably even do S video with the proper adapters. You're getting everything you need to get the exact signals out, and it is nice that it includes things like component, this with jacks, because I understand that everyone has a PVM that's going to accept an RGB signal, and if your TV doesn't even have component or S video, you can still go with that composite setup so you get that video out and kind of get that old school look. Now, a user on Twitter did ask if there's any chance that the dock would allow for a dual RAM setup, and Taki is saying it's not possible because they are using the 24-bit color mode on the actual RGB connectors. That means you're going to get less color banding in cores like PlayStation 1 and Nintendo 64, but honestly right now, the only two cores that even have dual RAM variants are going to be the Atari Jaguar core, which does have a single RAM version. It's slightly slower, but again, Atari Jaguar, not exactly the biggest hit out there for people, but it is one that uses dual RAM, and I had a lot of questions about that. Secondarily, the Sega Saturn core also still has a dual RAM version, but the single RAM version is like 99.999 to a rounding error identical to the dual RAM version, so you're really not going to be missing anything there whatsoever. So if you are curious about what that means, it's just going to mean that you might have a slightly slower Atari Jaguar, or maybe that'll end up on a single RAM core at the end, we just don't know. Additionally, people asked if this will be able to be used with a multi-tap, and absolutely, because it is just a built-in snack adapter, which means that any peripheral that plugged into an original PlayStation 1 should work perfectly fine here over on MiSTer FPGA. The controllers, the multi-taps, the like, you should be totally fine with absolutely everything, just like you would be on MiSTer, because again, those two controller ports and the two memory card slots are working off that snack protocol, which is basically just adapting the controller in on a serial connection, so it plays exactly the same. So when you're sitting down to play PlayStation 1 games with an original PlayStation 1 controller plugged in, it is doing exactly the same behind the scenes as it would if you were just sitting down and plugging that exact same controller into a PlayStation 1, and snack is going to be the absolute lowest latency possible. If you plug a snack controller in there and you play on something like a CRT, you're getting the exact same responsiveness as you would on original hardware back in the 90s. And again, you have so many different protocols here for controls, including the 1YC connector for light guns, because again, don't forget, light gun games were huge on PlayStation 1, and we have the ability to play them on CRTs today. So if you want to use something like GunCon 1 or GunCon 2, based for PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2, you're going to be able to use those on the SuperStation 1 as well, and I know I had a lot of questions about that, because both of these guns, whether they're on the PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2 version, have this composite jack here where you plug in the composite lead, basically to get sync for the GunCon sensor itself. Sometimes we do this with MiSTer add-on boards on the triple stack, but it's going to be built into the SuperStation 1, so you're going to get all of that additional light gun support. And one person asked, what's the cover under the bottom for? I know I already specified earlier in the video, but that is for the SSD or solid state drive. So you're going to be able to plug in a hard drive here, save your games, save all of the different items on MiSTer, put more games on. You can kind of just do it to your heart's content, and it is nice that people are going to be able to replace that with whatever size drive they want, because I believe it does ship completely empty and you have to populate it yourself. And again, this thing is still available right now for $179.99, so if you want to pick one up, you still absolutely can. It's definitely designed around the design language of a PlayStation 1 and has the functionality for the snack controller ports for that console, but again, it plays every single core MiSTer FPGA plays, which means it's also a Sega Saturn, it's also a Nintendo 64, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Sega CD. I could keep listing these things, but it would take a 20-minute video just for me to get all of the core names out into a voiceover, and it is just a pivot on the standard MiSTer FPGA formula, and we know Taki Udon and Retro Remake absolutely deliver, because the MiSTer Pi has been absolutely rock solid stable. I've been using it for a ton of my captures, and it basically lives next to my living room television as one of the MiSTers I use depending on what game I want to play. So getting these new, more design language cases, making a PlayStation 1 recreation case basically with a MiSTer FPGA inside of it that's acting like a PlayStation 1 by default, is just a ton of fun. And again, from the first review of the MiSTer Pi all the way through to today, the hardware has been great. It's done everything that a standard Jurassic board would do, so I can't wait to see what else Taki Udon and Retro Remake have coming, because there still is that handheld, there still is that flagship console, so it'll be very interesting to see how these things shape up. And again, if you just want a MiSTer Pi, Taki Udon's been talking about a restock soon, so just watch his Twitter. But but I definitely am excited to receive the review unit and take this thing apart, turn it all around, and tell you exactly what it does and how it does it, because again, I know there's a ton of excitement out there, and a lot of you have been asking for updates and more information about the SuperStation 1, so we have them here today. Leave me a comment down below, have you purchased one yet, or do you plan on purchasing one in the future? I would be curious who's jumping on the MiSTer FPGA bandwagon. But I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.